I spent years thinking I understood positioning until I realized that 99% of the positioning advice I've been given was dog shit. Now I've generated millions for online businesses because I stopped following that advice and started solving a completely different problem than the one my clients thought they had. Know your ICP, know your value prop, clarify your messaging. I did all of it. My clients did all of it. You're doing it right now. And we still hit the same wall, fighting for attention in a space where prospects couldn't tell you apart from your competitors if they tried. Here's the frightening truth. Positioning can make or break your business. But if your positioning is off, you'll always be fighting harder than you should for customers who still aren't sure why they should choose you. Now, if you're like most of the founders I work with, you're probably one reframe away from nailing your positioning, so you can finally break through the ceiling that better marketing, better sales, better everything hasn't been able to move. In the next 9 minutes, I'm going to show you how. Mistake 1. Create a category you can win by default. On paper, this feels like a power move. No competition, clear positioning. You win by definition. But winning doesn't translate into revenue when you define your category so narrowly that you remove demand. If you watch Schitt's Creek, you might remember when David Rose turns a local clothes store into a high-end boutique. He executes perfection, with a minimalist store layout and a giant black ostrich in the center of the shop floor. Hands down, it's the best high-end fashion store in a town with only one place to buy a blouse. Not one of the price-sensitive locals wants to buy a $500 sweater, so the store closes. This is why I'm always skeptical when coaches encourage entrepreneurs to niche down. It's always possible to define a market that's small enough to win. The real question is it big enough to matter? This is such an easy trap to fall into, and it happens when you stop asking if you're solving a real problem people care about and make the mistake of asking, how do I prove I'm the best at this tiny thing? That's a dangerous question to ask, because winning by default looks like having a monopoly, but it really isn't. It's naming yourself the mayor of a ghost town, and that's not going to grow your business. Mistake 2, sell yourself, not the product. This is another one that sounds right, and the data backs it up. 61% of people trust individual creators. Less than 40% trust brands. So the advice makes sense. Get visible, share your story, build an audience. People buy people. The founders doing this well are growing faster, charging more, and converting on trust alone. Just look at the Hermosis. 2 people, no product in their feed, just ideas. And they've built one of the most trusted brands in the entrepreneur space. Hundreds of millions of views, a 9-figure portfolio, all built on the back of a personal brand. Hard to argue with that. But there's a trap inside this advice that most founders fall straight into. I recall auditing a coach's About page a few years ago, and the first thing I said was, the main problem is, this is all about you. She looked confused. Her coach had told her that About page should showcase her as a BFD, a big fucking deal. And this is exactly what she'd done. She told her zero to hero journey and plastered the rest of the page with testimonials and logos. Here's the problem. Your customers aren't looking for a hero to save the day. They see themselves as the hero, trying to figure out and wondering if they have what it takes. What they're really looking for is a guide, a Gandalf to their Frodo. So when you show up saying, look at me, I did it, they don't think, take my money. They think, that's great, but how does this help me? So absolutely, build a personal brand, be the face of your business. But the moment you make yourself the hero, you've lost them. Because your prospect doesn't have time to listen to your story, not when they're busy looking for a guide. Mistake 3, differentiate or die. This advice is actually pretty decent. If your customer can't see a meaningful difference between you and your competitors, you don't really exist to them. The problem is that most of the advice around differentiation is bullshit. And the biggest culprit of them all is the one you've heard over and over from the day you started your business. Find your USP. USP stands for Unique Selling Proposition and was coined by Russell Reeves in 1961. And for its time, it was genius. Pick one thing you can do better than anyone else, say it clearly, and say it everywhere. In a world with 3 TV channels and a handful of competitors, a strong USP was a strategic weapon. Today, the USP concept is widely taught, but the average person is exposed to 6,000 ads every day, which means everyone has a USP. And when everyone has one, nobody does. When I ask founders about their USP, here's what I get. Sustainable weight loss, AI-powered marketing, results-driven approach. They're sentences every competitor in your space could copy and paste onto their website tomorrow. And then there's the other extreme. Brands that differentiate based on factors so specific they're basically irrelevant. Maybe you feel your yoga app is different because it was inspired during a solo trip to Bali. Maybe there's a great story there, but that's not a real differentiator, and it will weaken your positioning by pretending it is. So the advice isn't wrong. Differentiate or die is real, but the tool most people are using to do it is 60 years old and completely broken. So what's the alternative? You need to do two things at once, and most positioning advice only ever tells you to do one of them. The first is to find your real differentiator, not a sounds good USP, the specific thing that is genuinely defensively true about you that your competitors cannot copy. The second, and this is the part that often gets missed, is to choose the right market for that differentiator to operate in. Go too big and your differentiator sounds like noise. Go too small and you fall into the Schitt's Creek trap. One of my clients does this exceptionally well. She runs a weight loss program, massive red ocean, multi-billion-dollar market, fierce competition. Everyone on that space is promising sustainable weight loss, including her. What makes her different is her methodology. She doesn't give clients a meal plan. She turns them into scientists, auditing their psychology around food, running experiments, reading their own internal data to figure out exactly what works for their specific body. That's a real differentiator. Not a better version of what everyone else is doing, but a completely different approach to the same problem. And it allows her to bring a blue twist to a big, booming red ocean. This is purple ocean thinking, and the question it asks is this: what's the biggest market your difference can dominate? The two questions, what makes you different and where does that difference matter most, have to be answered together. Answer only one, and you're either a unique player in a market nobody wants, or a generic player in a market everybody's fighting over. Mistake 4, position against your competitors. This one is dangerous because it's so well-meaning. Whatever you're selling, you must understand what customers are comparing you to, because they're always comparing you to something, even if that something is the status quo, doing nothing or figuring it out themselves. Understanding that comparison is essential. Blue Ocean Strategy built an entire framework around this. The strategy canvas, the 4 actions framework, all designed to help you see what your competitors are competing on, so you can make a deliberate choice about where to play. The insight is real. If you don't understand the comparison your customer is making, can't influence it. But here's where most founders go wrong. The mistake is defining yourself in reaction to competitors, because in doing so, you surrender control of your positioning. You let them decide what matters, what gets compared, what better even means. And now you're stuck trying to win on criteria you didn't choose, which is why so many brands sound identical. They're all answering the same question, competing on the same features, and using the same language. They're trying to differentiate, but they're all differentiating against the same benchmark. So everybody winds up looking like slightly different versions of the same thing. So what's the alternative? Instead of positioning yourself against your competitors, position yourself against a common enemy. Not a brand or a product, the root cause of a problem your customer deeply, viscerally feels. The thing that's responsible for the nail-biting anxiety that keeps them up at night, the hair-pulling frustration that makes them bang their head against their keyboard, or the constant second-guessing. Let's use email software as an example. The default move is to position like this. We streamline automations with easy-to-use workflows. This puts the burden on the customer to compare features, interfaces, and price points. But what if you positioned it like this instead? The enemy of complicated email software. Now you're no longer asking, how do we compare? You're getting your competitors to align with you. Finally, someone who gets how frustrating this is. When this happens, they don't need to compare 6 platforms because they've picked a side. That's what smart positioning does. It doesn't help you win the comparison, it helps you make the competition irrelevant. But even if you nail all this, there's one final mistake that will undo everything. Mistake 5. Once your positioning is clear, everything clicks. Now, this one might seem ironic for someone who helps brands with their positioning for a living, but one of the biggest myths in the digital marketing world is that positioning is something to tick off your list. Markets don't sit still. Blue oceans turn blood red, and industries get disrupted overnight. In 2019, every copywriter I knew was gold dust. However, most of them have since repositioned as strategists, not because their skill changed, but because the market did. The ones who didn't adapt struggled. You see, positioning isn't a destination. It's an ongoing decision. And that brings me to the real problem with everything I've covered today. The majority of positioning advice optimizes for being different, being niche, being better. But none of that guarantees growth, because all of it is still asking the same question: where do we fit? If you're serious about quantum leaping your growth, you have to ask a different question. How do we make this category feel too small for what we do? That's what the next video is all about.